With arts now lost to the world, we transformed a tiny outpost into Dragonstone, a fortress fit for the last Dragon Lords. Then Aenar's descendants settled into it like a tomb for their lost homeland. Until Aegon. When he looked east, he saw the past, old, tired, dead. But when he looked west, he saw the future. Gold in the ground, gold in the fields, and no dragons in the sky but his. He and his sisters, Rhaenys and Visenya, flew over the great continent, ostensibly visitors to a strange land. But when Aegon returned, he ordered construction of a massive table carved in the shape of Westeros, with all the notable rivers and mountains that they had seen. A personal map of the Seven Kingdoms, then ruled by 7 squabbling families. House Durrandon held the Stormlands from their seat at Storm's End, due south of Dragonstone. House Hora of the Iron Islands had also conquered and enslaved the Riverlands, and ruled them from Harrenhal, a monstrous castle rising on the shore of the God's Eye. House Stark held the frozen wasteland of the north, the oldest, largest, and emptiest of the kingdoms. House Lannister held the Westerlands, the wealthiest kingdom, thanks to their gold mines. House Gardner held the Reach, the second wealthiest kingdom, thanks to their crops. House Arryn held the Vale, or rather the Vale held them. The mountains were impassable except through the Bloody Gate, which had never been taken. House Martell held the deserts of Dorne, probably because no one else wanted them. Together, the 7 kingdoms made Westeros, a realm that wasn't yet a realm, ruled by great families who didn't know what greatness was. Aegon would teach them.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. We have awesome news about Game of Thrones. They just picked up the brand new prequel series about the history of the Targaryen family called House of Dragons straight to series. They ordered 10 episodes for season 1, which means they want all the seasons to have 10 episodes. We know a whole bunch about it, so I'll break all the details down. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the bonus videos. Of course, I'll be doing episode videos and book Easter eggs for the series when it gets here, and I'll do bonus videos before it gets here too. We do have an early timeline for when they're going to be casting, when it's going into production, and when they're actually going to premiere the series. So I'll just do this top 10 style like I would normally do a Game of Thrones video. Starting with number 10. The name of the series, House of the Dragon, is based on Fire and Blood. If you haven't read that book, George R. R. Martin published it last year, is basically all this extra Targaryen history that he wrote while he was writing the main series, Winds of Winter, he's still working on right now. Eventually, he just compiled so much extra history and details about these characters that he just stuck it all in a book and called it Fire and Blood. And it's only part 1. There will be a part 2, because part 1 really only goes up through the end of the Dance of the Dragons. But number 9, who's making the series and what's Martin's involvement? Very important. They announced the series is being co-created with George R. R. Martin and Ryan Condal. Miguel Sapochnik is actually going to be co-showrunner with Ryan Condal, and George R. R. Martin is going to be an executive producer, which he was not on the main series. During the first 4 seasons of the main show, George R. R. Martin did get to give a lot of script notes and tell them when they were getting things wrong. He wrote an episode per season. Eventually what happened is, what you all saw, is that it hurt his progress on the main series of books. He was able to finish Dance with Dragons during those first 4 seasons, but because Winds of Winter was taking so much longer, he had to back away from the main show after season 4. They didn't say whether or not Martin would be writing scripts for the new series, but I'm assuming for now that he's just providing a lot more creative oversight and having a bigger say in what actually happens than he did on the original show. But pretty safe bet that he'll probably write an episode or 2 over the course of the series if it runs 7 to 8 seasons. Number 8 though, Miguel Sapochnik, very important get for this series. He was one of the best creatives behind some of the best Game of Thrones episodes on the original series. That's probably one of the reasons why HBO is moving so quickly on this Targaryen prequel. There was another prequel that they canceled recently, I'll talk about that in a second. But Sapochnik didn't start working on the main series until season 5, but he did The Gift, Hardhome, Battle of the Bastards, and Winds of Winter in season 6, and then he was forced to skip season 7 because of family issues, but came back and directed The Long Night, episode 3 during season 8, and then episode 5, The Bells. So he's mostly known for doing the biggest, craziest, and in a lot of cases, what you would consider the best episodes of Game of Thrones. So I'm really happy that he's going to be co-showrunner, so super powerful person on the new series. But for the most part, he's probably going to be spending most of his time on set managing that aspect of creative. His partner Ryan Condal and George R. Martin are probably going to be spending most of their time writing the series. They had two showrunners, Dan and Dave, on the main show. They still have two showrunners in the new series, but you have the addition of George R. Martin himself, who is also providing way more creative oversight. In case you missed it, after Season 8, I did a video about Miguel Sapochnik's deleted scenes that he talked about. I'll post a link to that at the end of this video, because the stuff that he says will blow your mind. Number 7, when does this House of the Dragon series actually take place? Most reports, all the news outlets that are reporting this in the trades, are saying it takes place 300 years ago, which would put it right at Aegon's conquest, because they say they're chronicling the Targaryen conquest of the Seven Kingdoms, but it will also eventually encompass the Dance of the Dragons. Here's the thing, if you know your Game of Thrones history, obviously Aegon's conquest 300 plus years ago, but the Dance of the Dragons, Targaryen Civil War, was about 129 years ago, so there's either going to be some massive time jumps during the series, or it's going to be an anthology series, which HBO did not say. They didn't say anything about anthology, so unless they really are jumping through time many years each season, they might just be handling all the stuff in the past, like Aegon's conquest, using flashbacks the way that the main show handled Robert's Rebellion. So most of Season 1, maybe Season 2, will be dedicated to telling the story of Aegon's conquest. They didn't say anything about covering the earlier period in ancient history, like the Doom of Valyria or the period before the Doom, but as is the style with Game of Thrones, characters discuss history and tell stories like Old Nan, events that happened in the past, so there will be some Old Nan type character, probably a Dragonstone or one of the other castles, telling tales of the Doom. Also keep in mind that because this is 300 years ago, this is still thousands of years after the Long Night, the building of the wall, and the establishment of the Night's Watch. So all that's happening up in the north long before Aegon ever conquered the Seven Kingdoms. Number 6, the early seasons, Aegon's conquest of the 6 kingdoms, because remember, he didn't conquer Dorne, so he only conquered 6 of the 7 kingdoms. The intro at the beginning of this, narrated by Viserys Targaryen himself, kind of gives you the small part of their early history after fleeing the Doom of Valyria after Daenerys the Dreamer had a vision foretelling the cataclysm. But Aegon himself, Aegon the Conqueror, was a few generations removed from Aenar Targaryen, the Targaryen that took them to Dragonstone fleeing the Doom. Leading up to the actual conquest, as a younger man, Aegon spent a lot of time flying his dragon, Balerion the Black Dread, with his sisters before they went full sister-wiving all over the 7 kingdoms, so they spent a lot of time in Westeros before they set it on fire. Aegon was so fascinated with Westeros that he actually commissioned the giant map table. That's why the formal name of this room is called the Chamber of the Painted Table. We spent a lot of time in Dragonstone across the series, mostly during Season 7, and they really only built out bigger sets in different rooms for Season 7, like the Throne Room, so hopefully they'll use it as an opportunity to build out other big sets in other places within Dragonstone, the same way they did for Winterfell in the early seasons. There are a number of castles from present day that we saw in the main show that were being built or were already built by the time Aegon conquered the 7 kingdoms. Harrenhal is probably the most infamous. In fact, the day that he finished building the castle and took up residence was the same day that Aegon Targaryen made landfall at the site that is now known as King's Landing. That's why it's called King's Landing, because that's where the future king landed his army. Within a year of that, he had taken Balerion the Black Dread to burn Harrenhal, melting most of its towers, and some say cursing it forever. But for after Aegon's conquest, the major events that the show would cover, or probably will cover, depending on how long they want to spend on each event, would be the rise of Aegon's sons, the First Dornish War, the Faith Militant Uprising, Maegor the Cruel building the Dragon Pit, the very first Great Council, which was actually held at Harrenhal after King Jaehaerys the Wise's son Balon died, because he didn't have another heir, he had to name another successor. So a Great Council was called, all the Lords of the Realm assembled to try and compel King Jaehaerys to pick another successor. Then they build through several other big tragedies that lead up to the Dance of the Dragons. So 3, the actual Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen Civil War lasted for about 2 years, so presumably if the new show runs for 7 or 8 seasons, the last 2 seasons at least would be spent telling that story, if not more seasons. There's no rule that says that each season of the show has to cover an entire year of the timeline, so they can actually spend the last half of the series during the Dance of the Dragons if they want. If you're not familiar with the Dance of the Dragons, it was the first major civil war in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. It was basically a war of succession between Aegon II and his half-sister Rhaenyra Targaryen over their father's throne. The two different sides were referred to as the Blacks and the Greens, and because this is a period in history when there are a lot of dragons, you wind up killing off a lot of dragons during this event. So if you're a big fan of dragons on the main show, this show in the last couple of seasons will have more dragons fighting each other in the air than you've ever seen before. Also, around the time of the Dance of the Dragons, there was a war in the East called the Daughters' War that was being fought over territory controlled by an organization called the Triarchy. So you could also cover things that are happening in Essos, bouncing back and forth between continents, just like the main show did during the early seasons. 2, I know you're all asking, when is Season 1 going to premiere, when are they going to announce the cast, and when will they start shooting it? Because they picked it up straight to series, that means that HBO is moving super fast. They only do stuff like that when they want episodes as quickly as possible. Given the amount of time it took to finish special effects and the amount of time it normally used to take to make seasons of the main show, as long as they cast it and start shooting by next summer, they can get episodes out by April 2021. Game of Thrones was always intended to be a spring, early summer show. I would plan on the new prequel series being the same. But number 1, I know you're asking, there was supposed to be a Long Night prequel series. They even shot a pilot episode. What happened to that? Just a couple days ago, before they announced this new series, they announced that they had canceled the Long Night prequel series. But I think it's clearly a dragons versus no dragons situation. So I will do more bonus videos as we get more information, but leave all your big questions and your video requests in the comments. Everybody click here for that Game of Thrones Season 8 deleted scenes video with a really cool interview from Miguel Sapochnik, and click here for my giant Game of Thrones playlist with all my bonus videos. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.